All right, welcome everyone to Techstars here on Crowdcast. We have an awesome AMA today for you. My name's Casey. I will be helping to moderate and helping you throughout the event. Before we get started, go ahead and shout out in the chat where you are from. I'd love to see who's listening today to us. I see we got a couple people already. That's awesome. Today we'll be talking about an exciting new book here from Matt Bloomberg, Startup CXO, Scaling Your Company's Critical Functions and Teams. We also have Jenny Lawton here, a Techstars friend, to help go over some of this stuff and give everyone advice here. So hey, Rosemary, welcome. So go ahead and shout out in the chat where you're from. We will start with our speakers giving us a little bit of bios, and then we'll go into some questions that I have for them. At any time throughout this broadcast, you can put your questions below our faces in the question and answer box, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can before the event. So remember, at any time, you can submit your questions below our faces and we'll get those answered for you. So I'd like to welcome our speakers, Matt and Jenny. Matt, can you go ahead and give a quick bio and background?
Yeah, sure. I'm Matt Bloomberg. Really happy to be here. I am currently founder and CEO of Bolster. Bolster is a relatively new company. We started it in 2020. And we are an online marketplace for on-demand executive talent. So we are a super easy way if you are thinking about how to scale your leadership team, how to scale yourself, how to scale your board by adding vetted, confirmed executive talent, either as a director, a coach, a mentor, a fractional executive, an interim executive. We are an online marketplace for that. Prior to starting Bolster, I was the founder and CEO of an email marketing company called Return Path for about 20 years. I'm based in New York. Return Path was New York and Boulder and a bunch of offices all around the world, all around the country. And I've been working as a mentor and coach for startup CEOs for a couple of decades now. So that's me.
Awesome. And Jenny?
Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm happy to be here today. I'm VP at Bolster, and I'm specifically working on structured programming to help startup CEOs become scaling CEOs. Prior to Bolster, I was the COO at Techstars for about 4 years. And prior to that, I'm an entrepreneur. I had a startup in the early 90s that I sold in 2000. And took about 10 years off to be a bookstore owner and coffee shop owner before I came back into the tech world, working at MakerBot and Little Bits before I came to Techstars. So I have a mixed background as a COO, a CEO, and a retail shop owner.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start it. And also, Jenny, I'm just going to ask you to try to speak up as loud as you can, I think just to help hear you a little bit better on your side. And so I have some questions for our speakers after reading about the book and working with them the past couple months on this event. But like I said, if anyone has questions as we get going, put those in the Q&A below our faces and we'll get to those in a few minutes. So first question, Matt, just like for you to tell us a little bit about Startup CXO, why did you write it? What is it, right? This might be a new term to some of us. So I'd love to kind of hear the background on Startup CXO and what it's about.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so Startup CXO is a new book in June, and it is the second of 3 books that I'm working on. So it helps to put it in context to talk about the first one. The first book that I wrote is called Startup CEO. And I wrote that in 2013. We did a second edition of it in 2020. And Startup CEO was kind of an outgrowth of my blog, which is startupceo.com. Startup CEO is really designed as like an instruction manual. It's called a field guide for a first-time founder CEO. So if you've never done the job before, Startup CEO is 65 or 70 chapters that are really short. They're like 3-4 page hits, quick hits on how to do specific things. Not that there's a right way or a wrong way to do anything, but just to give you some things to think about and some examples. So there are chapters on how to do a pitch deck, how to hire people, how to fire people, how to run a board meeting, how to work with an EA, that kind of thing. So kind of any topic that's top of mind for a founder, startup CEO, first-time CEO is covered in that book. when I finished that book, I realized that there was a huge part of being a CEO that it didn't cover, which is how to actually manage and lead and add value to the executives on your team, and how to think about constructing an executive team. So Startup CXO was a project that about 10 of us collaborated on. So it's got my name on it because you can't put 10 names on a book, but there are actually a whole bunch of authors. And they're all senior executives who were leaders of different functions, who've worked with me over the years, but have also worked at lots of other companies at lots of different sizes and stages over a 20 or 30 year career. So Startup CXO is like a book of books. There's a section on how to be a CFO of a startup that's got 25 quick chapters on how to do the different things that you need to do when you're a CFO of a startup. There are 25 chapters about how to run marketing at a startup, how to run sales at a startup, how to run technology, product, customer success, business development, operations, privacy, probably forgetting something, but it's sort of, all the major functions. So it's really a book of books. And it's designed for three different things. It's designed for founders and CEOs who really need to understand the full range of what needs to happen at an executive team, where those tasks fit, what kind of competencies you need to look for when you're hiring for those roles or when you're managing those people, how to tell if someone's doing a good job, how to tell if someone's scaling for each role. It's also hopefully useful for anyone who's leading a function at a startup as they think about their scope and span of control, making sure that they've got all the bases covered in their role, and also making sure that they have a good understanding of what their colleagues are working on. So if you're the head of sales, a first-time head of sales, your section of the book might be useful, but you should also really be paying attention to the marketing section and the customer success section. And then finally, we hope the book is going to be useful for anyone in an organization who is trying to grow their career and aspires to be a leader. So if you're early in your career marketing person working in the field event department of a company, and you read the CMO section, hopefully that gives you some sense of what your career roadmap needs to look like. If you want to be a CMO someday, you need to get some experience in a whole bunch of different areas you'll find in the CMO section: brand, digital, PR, search, etc. So lots of use cases for the book. That's Startup CXO. And just to tease real quickly, the third book, which is coming out at the end of the year, I'm collaborating with my friend Brad Feld and Mahendra Ramsangani on a second edition of a book called Startup Boards, which hopefully will be a great resource for CEOs and founders about how to build and run a highly effective and diverse board of directors.
Awesome, thank you. Hopefully everyone can check those out. That sounds like a lot of super helpful guides, like you said. So this next question, I'm going to go ahead and see. Jenny, I can't get your audio on. Are you able to click on and off? Okay, so I'm gonna bring you off video and bring you back on. Sometimes when you switch the microphone, it changes your audio source. So I'm going to kick Jenny out and bring her back on, and we'll give everyone a second to catch up here. All right, let me find her again. There we go. Bring her back on. And in the meantime, I know I had a question for Jenny, but while we.
Yes.
All right, Jenny, make sure you don't have the Crowdcast open in another tab or another window. Sometimes I'll bring on like double microphone. Oh, awesome, Alan. Thank you.
I think that was it.
Awesome. Great. Cool. All right. We are back. Cool. So, Jenny, so we heard about, a little bit about what the book is about and how it can help everyone watching. So we have some awesome founders from around the world on here. I like this question to go to both of you, but Jenny first, especially with your experience, how can you tell if it's time to hire your first CXO in any given area?
So I think that the first time you ask yourself that question, is it time for me to hire a CXO, is probably the right time and potentially a little bit too late. And the reason why it might be a little too late is because you're usually asking that question because you're overwhelmed or underwater, or not exactly sure what territory you're in terms of running a business. So as a startup CEO, you often need to be a generalist, but you may not have done all the roles or know what all the roles are. And I think that when you enter that territory of not quite knowing, that's definitely the time when you need to bring on someone to help with that function. It may not be a C-level person, but for where you are in a startup, it often is gonna fulfill the role as a C-level person. So I think as soon as you're finding yourself in the position where you're looking for help and looking for answers from someone and you don't quite know, that you're probably about 3 months behind in making that hire.
Cool. And what about you, Matt?
Yeah, let me give an example from the book, which is the example of a CFO, but you'll I think get the pattern here that you can apply to anything. So I think there's sort of 3 cues that it's time to hire your first whatever CXO. But for the example of CFO, the first one is you're spending too much of your own time doing that job. So, you're spending too much of your own time. You're just getting consumed with managing fundraising, managing debt, managing investors, managing cap table questions and issues. So it's just consuming you. The second thing is what I call the middle of the night problem. So, it's like you wake up in a panic in the middle of the night about something. And in the case of that would point you to hire a CFO, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're in this panic about cash. And it's not just that you're running out of cash, although you might wake up in the middle of the night, panic that you're running out of cash as a startup. But you wake up and you're panicked that you think you know how much cash you have, but you're actually not quite sure how fast you're spending it. And, someone just asked you how many months left of runway you had, and you couldn't answer that question. Right? So that's a sign that someone else needs to come in and own that. And then the third thing is what I call, sort of the don't even know where to look question. So in the case of CFO, it's time to hire a CFO when, someone on your board, one of your investors, asks you a question that shouldn't be that hard a question. So, hey, what's your CAC? What are gross margins trending up or down? What's the ROI of some investment you made? And you realize that not only do you not have an answer to that question, but you're not even quite sure how to get one because the answer sits in different spreadsheets and different systems. And so all 3 of these things, it's time to hire someone when it's consuming you, when you wake up in the middle of the night in a panic about a detail, or you don't even know where the details are.
Awesome. All right, next question. How can you tell if a functional leader you have isn't scaling? So how can you tell if you have a leader in your company or functional leader that you have isn't scaling to the needs that you have? Matt, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll give you the example of CFO again, since we're sort of on that line of thought. With CFO, there are a few things. I think one is they take on the role of late night hero. There's always a crisis. There's always pending crunch time. They're the only person that can do it. It takes a ton of manual work, whether it's the monthly close, the audit, the budget, doing commission planning, doing compensation. A CFO who's mired in personally doing all of those things and is the personal choke point to doing things just hasn't built systems or teams or processes that are scalable in any way, shape, or form. So late night hero is kind of one theme. A second theme that I find that's a sign the CXO isn't scaling is they throw bodies at problems. In the finance function, that tends to be the accounting team. So instead of putting a process in place, instead of putting a system in place, instead of automating things, they're just like adding people to the mix. I would say the third sign that a CXO isn't scaling is that they don't have time or they don't have the wherewithal to do the strategic work of their department. So most departments, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go, most departments have a tactical end to it and a strategic end to it. And if you have someone running a department that can't get out of the tactical, then it's a real problem. So in the case of CFO, it's they can't do a forecast. They don't have time to do some critical business partner analysis for someone else on your team. They don't even try. They're just stuck in the details.
Great. And Jenny, from your standpoint?
I'll have to agree with everything that Matt just said, but one of the ways I often try to boil it down to help people sort of be able to see through the forest is, are we playing kids soccer or are we playing professional soccer? So if you've ever watched a bunch of kids playing soccer, you can see the soccer ball going around the field and all of the kids following the soccer ball. And the goalie's often with that hive of kids, and it's really easy. It's really easy to get a shot on the goal because there's no one there watching the shot. So in professional soccer, everyone has a role. They understand what it is, but they're a team. They're working together, pulling for the common good. Scaling is about efficiency, and it's about not doing something linearly. So that concept of hiring people to solve a problem is potentially even less than linear. The cost is more expensive than the benefit. And what you're really looking for is scaling an organization as someone who understands how to put the systems in place to allow for the growth to go up on a curve, not in a linear way. And that's sometimes replacing manual processes with automatic ones. It's bringing in new systems. It's buying versus building. But that piece of looking up instead of down, I often tell people to look up. That's where you need to be looking, so that you're looking ahead and you've got that strategic view on things.
Awesome, super helpful. Next one is, Jenny, I'll start with you since we have you on the microphone. I was wondering when to think about the on-demand talent and for what function. So I know that both of you work with this and at Bolster, focusing on on-demand talent. So when is it time to think about specifically that kind of talent and for what functions?
So I think there's always an option to think about on-demand, interim, fractional type talent, and it happens at different stages. It happens at different times based on the stage that you are in your company. An early stage company is able to make use of a higher level of talent than you might normally hire on a full-time basis by bringing someone in on a fractional basis or a less than full-time basis. And understanding that you can manage, that you can get strategic value from someone earlier because you're paying for their time on a fractional basis and getting that experience. Doing that as early as you possibly can is going to get the benefit of scaling the business faster and getting that expertise in faster. My first business was an outsourcing business. We sold network administration services on a partial basis, and the whole concept is that you could hire someone for 8 hours a week to come in and manage your computer network, and have all of the continuity and all of the benefit of having a network administrator without paying for someone full time. And the continuity and passing on of information was also very important, but you got what you needed. You got outsized talent early, which is really important to be able to, for a company to start to be able to scale so that CEO isn't spending their time in the weeds doing the work. So in my mind, it's never too early, but it's making sure that you've got the right fit at the right time. The other thing that I think it allows you to do is to, with those savings, hire some of the people who are going to be doing the work. So a couple of levels down, being able to make sure that you've got the underpinnings while you also have really outsized talent helping you with what that strategy and the strategic direction needs to be.
Awesome. And Matt?
Yeah, I think for early stage companies, the reality is you just can't afford to have, and you're not ready to have a full-time, $200,000 or $300,000 person sitting in every chair around the table. But fractional talent or on-demand talent really gives you the opportunity to have that strategic guidance for each function in the company. And I think every function in a company could be fractional. It depends on any individual company's team composition and business and size and stage and everything else. But there are times for each function where it will work. So to come back to our CFO example, fractional CFOs. Which it may be that may be the function that uses fractional talent the most in the ecosystem. But a fractional CFO can work for many years if a few things are true, right? If your business model is really straightforward, like you have a very limited number of complex accounting issues, you have a very limited number of customers and invoices and transactions. If there's a very insignificant difference between your income statement and cash flow statement. If you really just need help making sure that the accounting is right, and occasionally there's a financing event that you need some support on, like fractional CFO could work. If you think about, I'll give you another example. You think about the example of sales, where that may seem totally counterintuitive, like really a fractional chief revenue officer. Fractional CRO could very much be the way to go if your sale is to a very senior buyer, and you need someone to come in and sort of play that role with a more junior sales rep, but you don't necessarily need a CRO full time to supervise a whole sales machine. A fractional CRO could also be really helpful if you're not sure what kind of sales leader you need long term. So I talked to a lot of early stage CEOs who have a great product, and they're like, we have a B2B2C version of it, we have an SMB version of it, we have an enterprise version of it. I don't know what kind of CRO I need. Great opportunity to try some people out and see where they're having the best impact in the organization. CRO in particular is a really expensive hire, and one that goes south in a hurry if they're on a highly leveraged commission plan and there's not enough sales to feed them. So having someone that's interim or fractional there could make a lot of sense. Examples for every other function as well.
Awesome. All right. So we have some questions coming in from the audience that I'm going to take a few from. And if you are watching, go ahead and submit your questions, or you can also upvote the ones that you also want to see answered. And I will start taking those from the top of the list. So for this first one, what's the minimum amount of time it takes for fractional CEO or fractional CXO to become effective?
Boy, it's not long. Like a good rate. When you hire someone for that kind of a role, you're hiring a pro, right? You're hiring someone who is a career CXO. They have done that job for years, usually at multiple companies at sizes and stages. They can come up to speed much faster than you would think. And particularly if you are focused on how you use them or manage them, like ramp time can be measured in hours as opposed to days or weeks. Jenny, you're doing some work with one of our clients now with some fractionals, right? What's that experience been looking like?
So, my experience in working with some of our clients is that it's been, less than a week to bring them up to speed, and to not only bring them up to speed, but potentially ramp up their time. So, in one particular case where someone came in working 8 hours a week, very quickly figured out where the minefields were, and was able to very effectively deal with a change in employees and be able to ramp up their time to be able to take things forward. So I think one of the things that's interesting when you're working with professional CXOs, people who have been there, done that before, is that it's always a little humbling to find out that almost all of the problems that you're going to run into in your company, or almost all of the issues that you have, someone has seen them before and knows the answers, and is able to apply them quickly based on what your business is. And so it's a very quick ramp up. And what will help is being organized and in terms of bringing that person on board as well.
Awesome, thank you. Next one, how do you propose a CXO position in a new startup if you need to validate the need at the start of it?
Validate what do you think? Validate the need for
the CXO position, yes.
And sorry, it's how do you position it?
How do you propose that position in a new startup?
I'm not sure I follow the question. How do you propose it?
Like hiring that role. Like, how do you propose the need for this position at your startup?
Well, yeah, I think that sort of gets back to the one of the first questions you asked, which is like when do you know it's time to hire someone? So hopefully some of those things are guideposts, like it's taking up too much of your time, for example, or you're sort of out of your, like the most senior person doing it doesn't know what needs to be done next. The good thing about on-demand talent is it's very low risk of going wrong. The traditional model of hiring a full-time senior executive is high cost, high risk, right? It costs a lot of money to hire a search firm, a lot of money to hire a full-time person, and it takes a long time. And making the business case for that is really important. Making the business case to bring in a freelance executive one day a week with no long-term commitment, where you can find the person in an hour on Bolster or on any other number of places and not spend a lot up front for it, is small business case, small risk.
I think, though, to add on to that, certainly you don't want to, if you have a team of 10 people and then the next day there's a fractional CXO there, probably not the way to do it. At least having a conversation and, hey, it seems like we might need this role. Let's talk about how that works. I think that this is a good way to fill that. That's definitely a good way to have the conversation. So, it's not something that you just want to pull someone in on. But I think also as a CEO, being comfortable with the fact that you need a team and be able to say, we need a team to be able to get this done.
Awesome. Yeah, that kind of goes into the next question that Michael or Alex actually has is, how does this concept work for a multi-founder startup, right? So is there any difference if you have like multiple founders, anything like that conversation of the team that you just talked about, Jenny?
So I think that one of the things that's important when you think about organization is that you need to first off think about position and second off think about people. So it's not, when you think about having multiple co-founders, it shouldn't necessarily be this person is doing this, that, and the others. What are the roles that we need? What are the functions that we need to make this business work and to be able to not just grow, but be able to scale the business? And then once you define what that organization looks like based on the positions, now you look across the field of people, co-founders, founders, whoever you have, who do we have that fits these roles, these positions? And let's put them in the right places. And now let's do the gap analysis. Where are the gaps? And then what's the prioritization? Now let's look what we need to do. And that really is the way that you want to operate your organization. A lot of people do it in the inverse way. I have this person in this role. I can't possibly change what they're doing. And that doesn't necessarily benefit the organization because it may not be the right person in the right seat. So if you really want to see your business and succeed, you need to understand what it is what roles you have, do that gap analysis, and make sure that you put the right people in the right seats.
Yeah. So my example of that is Jenny. So Bolster has 8 co-founders, which might be a record, and I'm not sure I would recommend that for everybody, although it's working for us. And we were, I don't know, probably 9 months in. And I recognized that there were a few really specific things that weren't getting done that I wanted to get done that we just didn't have the person to do. And we brought Jenny on board first as a combination of interim and fractional to help us get those things started. And once she was in, over the course of a few months, it became clear that she should join the team and take on those roles full time. So I totally agree, Jenny. It's all about what needs to be done and who's the best person to do it.
Awesome. Next question from Michael. Okay, this is a long one. How do you think the startups should show and reciprocate commitment to an early CXO? Being such a critical hire to get right, how would you evaluate title, CXO, co-founder, et cetera, decision-making freedom and or equity, growth potential, Second, is it better to be late on hiring or early with this level of leadership?
Jenny, why don't you start on that?
So one of the things that's interesting, I'll answer the question a little bit in backwards. So, early or late, there are inflection points in the growth of a company, and passing through inflection points without addressing them picks up institutional debt. So one of the things you want to be aware of as the company is growing is you want to keep your debt load low so that you're able to pull forward as quickly as possible. So I would err on hiring a little earlier than later. One of the things that happens when you hire a little later is that you just add fatigue to the organization, and you take away the benefit of having someone in that role. So I always look at it as better to have your pants be a little baggy so that you can grow into them than it is to have them be too tight and you bust out of them. So that's one way to sort of think and think about how are you feeling? Like, if you have this role, how's that going to feel? And in terms of title, in terms of pay, I'm a huge fan of the concept that when someone offers you a seat on a rocket ship, that you don't say, what's the seat? You say, I want to get on that rocket ship. So like when you're hiring someone to be a CXO in your company, you want them to be invested, you want them to be on board because they believe in that you're going to the moon on a rocket ship. So when I find someone super indexed on what's the title, how many people report to me, how's this work, that may not actually be the right fit because I need someone to be on the team. I always look to have some sort of concept of what the levels of salary and equity are so that I don't have to change that over time too much. And I offer people to be in the range of what we're paying people. And I'm not really a big fan of going outside the boundaries, either too low or too high. So really having a sense of how you want to structure that before you start to hire people is it's worth taking a little bit of time on that, and putting yourself outside the comfort zone to hire a little early is also would also be my, in my experience, that's the best way to approach it. A key inflection point, by the way, is 20 people. If you don't have an administrative person in your business when you've got 20 people, you've lost it. You're behind the curve. You need to have someone to be able to start to offload and help with how project management and operations work in the business.
Cool. Matt, anything to add to that?
Nope, that was great.
All right, consider that one done. So I have a question before we have one more from the audience that we'll get to. Reminder, if you have any questions on here, go ahead and submit them below the video. So, we're talking a lot about this role, the CXO. We also talk a lot about CEO. Obviously at Techstars, we believe in mentorship a lot. I know it's something that you guys both help out with, mentoring and giving first to startups. So do CXOs need coaches or just a CEO? Are there people that help to coach CXOs? And, when you think about that, how to get help for your leadership team, what's the difference between a coach and a mentor? And how would someone that's a CXO or you have a CXO on your team go about finding a coach or a mentor?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So let me kind of answer those in reverse. So I think there are a lot of words that tend to be used interchangeably: coach, mentor, advisor. And we've been trying, because we place all of those in our marketplace, we've been trying to get to a crisp definition of them. So I don't know if this is right or universal, but it's what we've been saying. A coach is someone who can help you develop, can help any person, but can help any CEO or CXO develop as a leader. And I sort of view a coach's job as helping you be the best version of you. When I think about mentor, I think about, I almost like to refer to that as a functional mentor. And I think about that as someone who has done your job before, usually for a long time and many times, and can teach you the craft of your job. So if you're any leader in a business, CEO, CFO, head of sales, you can have a coach and you can have a functional mentor. Occasionally you get those in the same person, right? If someone is a career CRO and then decides to stop doing that and become a coach, and they get trained in how to be a coach. you can get that in the same person, but frequently you benefit from having both. And we absolutely believe that that any CXO would benefit from coaching and mentorship. That those things are not just the realm of CEOs, not even close.
Cool. Jenny, anything to add about coaches and mentors for the CXO role?
Well, I absolutely agree with Matt. I would say that adding it, when you hire a coach or hire a mentor, it takes it to a new level. That person then has an agreement with you to be engaged and be present and have you be a part of, to take mind share with them all the time. Very different than the concept of give first mentoring, and it's a much deeper experience. So sometimes the right way to go is to look at working on yourself, but also especially with people who are in roles that they might not have had before, finding a mentor who can share their experiences is invaluable. I mean, it pays off in spades.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to go and take this one from the audience, from our friend John Guyden.
John Guyden.
I think we all know and love him. This one's going to be for Matt. And he says, Return Path was one of the first companies to establish a people-first culture where the circle of life for a high-growth business began with employees at the forefront. How has Bolster incorporated culture fit into your process, and can you elaborate on your progressive approach to people?
I can. So John, thank you for the question. Mm-hmm. It's nice to hear from you. Definitely send me an email and let me know how you're doing and what you're doing. I can talk about this from the perspective of Bolster's model, not Bolster as an employer. Like, we have a very small number of team members, but we're a people business. So let me talk about that from the what, the who, and the how. So what Bolster does is, provide a match between executives and companies. But the essence of what we're doing is helping companies scale up smartly and scale up their people smartly. So the concept of finding a functional mentor for your marketing director, or finding a fractional CMO that can help, 1 day a week, 2 days a week steer, the finance organization. That's a really different approach to leveling up your team than constantly saying, oh, I got to rip and replace the leader. We believe that there's huge opportunity in startups to scale people, and scaling people through mentors, coaches, and fractional executives is really important. In terms of the who, Bolster sources its executives, the people who join Bolster as members and who are available to work in startups, in a couple of different ways. We do source out of the venture and tech ecosystem pretty aggressively. A lot of venture capital firms refer their stable of consultants and freelancers and trusted advisors to us, and we've built a good base of talent that way. But we also recognize that there's some limitations to who is in that traditional base of talent for the venture tech ecosystem. So we've worked very hard with now about 75 different partner organizations that represent different parts of the executive talent group in this country, from associations of female executives to associations of Black executives, Latinx executives, LGBTQ executives, who might not have a lot of experience in venture tech companies, but who have very rich experiences running their function in other industries. So when you do a search on Bolster, you find both types and you see diverse slates, which I think is a really important part of broadening the talent funnel into tech. And then finally, we think about the how, sort of how we match talent and companies. And obviously, if you're a CEO and you're trying to hire a fractional chief product officer, you want to make sure the person is qualified to do the job. We make sure the person's qualified to do the job, but we also want to give our clients and our members an opportunity to learn more about each other, even before an interview process. So part of what you do when you fill out a Bolster profile is you fill out something called your user guide. And your user guide, and John, you might be familiar with this. It's like your instruction manual. How do you operate? How does someone operate you? And you're answering questions there about, what's your communication style? Are you direct? Are you indirect? Are you an extrovert or an introvert? How do you like to work? What types of, hours do you use? What types of communication channels do you use? A whole bunch of questions like that, so that, we do our best to make sure that the work style fit is there when we make a match as well.
Awesome, thank you. Go ahead and close that one out. We had one question in the chat from Teddy. What is commonly the first CXO hire for a first-time biz sales focused CEO of a B2B tech company with lots of devs and engineers?
I think it's a great question. I think it depends a little bit on where you are in your life cycle. Hiring sales and or marketing might be the answer, but you can't do either one too early. So I hate to give a wishy-washy answer, but hiring senior sales and marketing leadership before you really understand who you're selling to, what the buying cycle is, what the price points are, might be getting out a little bit on your skis, especially if you are a sales-focused CEO. So, if you have ample developers, engineers, but not enough leadership in product, and you can't necessarily supply that leadership the way you want because you came up through the go-to-market ranks, maybe it's counterintuitive, but it may make more sense to hire leadership there. I don't know, Jenny, what do you think?
Yeah, so there's no one answer. So there's almost not enough in the clues there. But I think that I will say as a caution that a lot of sales focused CEOs misunderstand the need to bring in sales leadership. And sales is probably one of the most difficult late hires to recover from. So bringing in strong sales leadership and being able to have that be effective has a long tail on it when you make that hire. So recognizing too late that you need that sales leadership and that it's outgrown the CEO because the CEO is not able to do anything more than sales can have a 6 to 9 month lag on it based on your business. So being aware of the balance of what you're doing and knowing when the water is starting to come up over your nose is probably the best thing that you want to look at signal wise. And you do eventually want to bring people in who complement your strengths, but also amplify your strengths. So it's not just making sure that you're filling the gaps. It's also doubling down on what you know that you're good at. So it really is an analysis that you need to go through, and there are a lot of ways to do that. Certainly, happy to help people talk through what that looks like, and that is some of what Bolster can offer. Also, someone who can sit down and work through what that looks like, what your team looks like today, what it needs to look like in the future, and what that roadmap looks like in order to start to fill those gaps and amplify the roles that you need to amplify.
Great. We had one more come in from Michael. It says, what would you consider to be a role or two of expertise under a C-level role? What should I expect out of a C-level hire compared to these roles? Don't know if there's enough info there.
I think high level, C-level is going to be big thinking strategy type person. And the people who report to them or are on the team are going to be more of the people who are getting the work done. But, I think that it's dangerous to think that you separate things that in a black and white way there. You need someone to, be 80-20 on strategy, tactical, 80-20 on tactical strategy, and somewhere in between there. So you want to get a good balance. Certainly you need everyone aligned strategically, but a CXO is going to be bigger thinking and strategic leadership oriented, where the team who works for them is going to think big, but also execute. And my favorite, GSD. So I think that I think you need to think about what that breakdown looks like.
Yeah, and it's going to vary widely by function for sure.
Cool.
Ideally, for startups, though, you want to bring in executives who roll up their sleeves and do tactical work too. There's no room in a 20-person company for someone to be the big thinker. I mean, maybe there's room for the founder to be the big thinker, but every founder I know works their butt off and is writing marketing copy or writing code or on the phone with customers all day long. So, hopefully you're finding CXOs that are good fits for startups.
Cool. I have one last question before we go into some, wrapping up summary thoughts. We've been talking a lot about who to hire, when to hire. And so I'd love to hear from both of your extensive, professional experiences and backgrounds. And I'll start with Jenny. What are positions you wish you hired for earlier, or that you've heard other opinions on they wish they hired earlier?
Flat out sales. My first business, I was the book of business, and I knew about $5 million worth of people. And then I didn't know any more than $5 million worth of people and needed to double that number, and was very, very behind the curve when it came to that. And so have a very healthy appreciation for the fact that sales is something that if you bring someone in to run with it, it will go further than the CEO if you find the right people. The second function I think that's critical is someone who in the CFO role. And CFOs are partners to the CEO. They're business people. They are not a controller. They are not an accountant. And making sure that to me, it's important to make sure that there's a big picture on the finance side and that there's a plan to execute on. It's an easy role to have as a fractional role in my mind. It's being able to have quick hits on that is important, but I think that that's something that people really misunderstand. A CFO is not a bookkeeper. They're not the person who's necessarily going to be creating all the journal entries, but getting someone with that thinking, I think is an important thing and something that I actually had in my first business, which I really appreciated and really made sure that we had that in all the other businesses that I've been a part of.
Cool. And so Matt, along that line, what are some of the most important hires early on that you've seen?
Yeah, I'll give a different example. I like those too, but here's one or two, depending on how you look at it, that people don't think about early enough. And neither one of these would be a full-time hire for a startup. These would be fractional or consulting hires. Privacy and security. Data is the currency of life these days. How you interact with your users, what your policies are around data collection and retention, and what your practices are around those and the technology underneath them are so important to get right and get right out of the gate. And they're really hard if you mess them up to go back and fix them later. And security, we're living in crazy times, and we like to think that the ransomware attacks on the world are limited to beef production and oil pipelines, but you got to take security very serious from the beginning. Now, there are a lot of people that are chief privacy and security officers, and you can have them come in and do a few hours of work here and there. But I always think that building that stuff in by design up front is really, really helpful for startups.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we are coming near the end of all of our questions. I want to thank everyone for listening. And I also just want to do another rapid round to Matt and Jenny. Since you all have so much experience being founders, CEOs, and now helping others find those roles, what is one tip that you would give founders listening today on this call? Matt, I'm going to start with you.
About anything?
Anything. I know it's very wide. This is a curveball I'm throwing you.
My one tip for founders is take care of yourself. It is really easy to work 1 billion hours a week and forget about your friends and forget about your family and forget about your health and forget about exercising and forget about sleep. And I think founders do their best work when they do less work.
Awesome. Jenny?
I think ask for help early and often, and don't be shy about that. It's not. There's so many people out there who will put their hand on your back and help you in any way. Like even where Matt was saying, take care of yourself. Almost anyone that I think you reach out to will make sure both that you're taking care of yourself and that you're getting the help and support that you need. You need to be bolstered in your experience, and you learn from other people's experiences. And it's, to me, that's the best way to go forward. So, an army of people to help you will get you further faster. And I love to move fast. And so making sure that there are people to help me do that has always been an important piece of my life.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt and Jenny, for listening. This has been recorded and will be at the same link afterwards. So as soon as we hang up a couple minutes, the replay will come up and you can rewatch it anytime, send it to your co-founders, your teammates. We'll add some links in the chat and you can scroll up and see Andrea has put some awesome ones in there to some Bolster resources. We hope you reach out to Matt and Jenny if you need any help. And once again, go ahead and check out the new Startup CXO book, and hopefully that can be some good summer reading for you. And we will see you guys next time on Crowdcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.